The state of California has finally foreclosed on Activision Blizzard's state of moral bankruptcy. Why should this come as any surprise to anyone? They've been telegraphing their hypocrisy and villainy for years. They have been locked in a downward spiral of doing bad things and then issuing bland corporate statements of apology. Banning Blitzchung, the Diablo Immortal on mobile reveal. Alan Brack's smirking apology. He literally laughed at the audience. /suckers. This train has been a long time coming down the tracks, and Activision Blizzard has been tooting the whistle all the way. So why is anyone acting surprised at the recent revelations of their additional crimes?
When I think about what I'm most unhappy about, there's really two things. The first one is we didn't live up to the high standards that we really set for ourselves. And the second is we failed in our purpose. And for that, I am sorry, and I accept accountability.
I'm getting out of here!
There is a very interesting video on YouTube where the renowned and brilliant psychologist Jordan Peterson discusses the implications of ignoring the small signs of coming betrayal. Peterson explains how in a relationship, issues and aberrations with a partner's behaviour need to be addressed as you go along.
And in order to keep a relationship healthy, it needs to be retooled at micro levels constantly.
It's sometimes unpleasant. It sometimes leads to conflict. But ultimately, better and healthier in the long run. By failing to address these small problems or objectionable behaviour as you go along, you are foregoing a string of opportunities to adjust the relationship on the micro level, and ultimately, this failure to manage the small problems in the relationship almost inevitably results in a huge betrayal later on. I bring this up because I think this thesis applies equally to the relationship between gamers and video game communities and the video game publishers. As gamers, I think we are not doing enough to manage our relationship with video game publishers, and as a result, we are now being betrayed by multiple corporations on multiple levels. We have let the small things slide, like microtransactions, loot boxes, paywalled content, paid off reviewers, and community censorship. And now we're in a position where these companies don't feel like there are any moral restrictions on their behaviour whatsoever. I have to issue a few caveats for this video. This entire shit show is a huge hornet's nest of accusations, allegations and legal cases. Nothing I say should be assumed to be factually true or constitute allegations. I am merely reporting the information as best I know it. Nothing I say should be assumed to be a statement of literal fact. I say all of this because all of us need to do our own research. And because it's a legal disclaimer to cover my arse against being sued. Although I will say now, J. Alan Brack is a greasy smirking fuck. That's an indisputable fact. The point of this video is not directly to assess the validity of the claims. I'm confident that Activision Blizzard is most likely guilty of a lot, if not most of this horrific conduct. I'm also confident that the state of California has its own axe to grind and woke agenda to prosecute. Christ, maybe California is just so piss poor broke after a year of forest fires in the countryside and politically motivated arson in the urban centres that they see suing Activision Blizzard on company time as a means to hurl huge fines at a big fat cat rich target and generate some juicy free revenue. I can't really comment. Depending on who you speak to, the state of California is either sitting on a multi-billion-dollar surplus or hiding a multi-billion-dollar deficit. So who knows if they're swimming in cash or piss fucking poor. all this being cogitated, I'm talking about this subject primarily because Blizzard's decline into moral bankruptcy during its financial ascendancy teaches us all a valuable lesson about holding corporations to account. It teaches us how nostalgia for a brand based on former glories and fond memories can trick us into writing off the warning signs that a company has turned into a monster and has grown rotten to its very core. It teaches us that we must not let companies off the hook when they do shitty things just because we like them. Because ultimately, the more we let them get away with it, the more they try and get away with. So what's the situation? The short version is that Activision Blizzard is armpits deep in a giant fucking cesspool of trouble entirely of its own making. The state of California is suing them for a litany of abuses, primarily surrounding issues of staff treatment and welfare, but recently extended to include freelancers and contract workers. Well, they had to really, because like every callous modern corporation, Activision Blizzard is not shy about sacking huge swathes of its workers, then hiring them back as contractors, because it's cheaper and they don't have any employment rights. The allegations and accusations are too numerous to catalogue, but here is a light sprinkling of the fuckery that I've heard about. They are facing a huge high-profile lawsuit. Crazy allegations erupted due to the information in the court filings. They apparently have huge pay disparities there. Workplace discrimination and harassment is rife. Managers and HR appear to take no action against complaints. Corpo types on work trips were sharing explicit photos of female members of staff on the bus. A girl was allegedly so mercilessly bullied that she killed herself on a work trip. One of the managers, interviewed by the police, was in possession of a butt plug and some lube. Nothing wrong with butt plugs. I'm not judging. I just don't think they have any work-related use in the standard office environment. Because if they did, you'd be able to find them in stationery catalogues, nestled between staplers and Sharpie pens. Then again, plenty of women at Activision Blizzard probably have vibrators in their handbags, and you don't see them in stationery catalogues either. Trust me, I've looked. The ActiBlizz managers apparently also used to have a special hotel room booked for work outings, for the specific and explicit purpose of getting girls hideously drunk and shagging them. Forgive me if that description sounds a mite judgmental, but these creepy fucks did nickname the room the Cosby Suite. Guilty or innocent, naming the room after a guy who is frankly most famous for decades of accusations of drugging and sexually assaulting women, I think any reputational damage here is self-inflicted. In the interests of absolute fairness, we do need to keep in mind that the reporting on the Cosby Suite and the strings of jockish DMs leaked from conventions have all been represented in the worst possible light. I'm sure many of us have engaged in lads banter, which, taken out of context, could be used to paint an incriminating picture of activities where really it was just booze, bullshit and big words. Belula News does a much better job than me at breaking down the evidence thus far and explaining the pros and cons of some of the backstory, far more fairly than I would ever bother to do. So let's just agree for now that there are many attempts to explain away the allegations, and explain away the depiction of the Cosby Suite as some kind of predator trap to ensnare young drunk women. I even saw one report from one girl who was invited to the Cosby Suite, and by her own admission she was unaware of any of this. However, her account also alluded to the fact that one of her drunken senior managers felt her up when she was there. And let's not forget, this was BlizzCon. This was a work location, and these events were populated by drunken managers. There is no way you can spin this in a good way. You don't pull stunts like this at work events. Drunk senior managers hitting on and feeling up low-level developers is never going to pan out well. It has been noted that there has not been a giant groundswell of Me Too-esque accusations appearing in the light of the court case announcement. But, as has been pointed out, we don't know whether this is the result of complainants signing non-disclosure agreements. Strangely, precisely the same tactic that kept Cosby's accusations under wraps for decades. In some way, maybe it really is best for everyone if this all ends up in court, so everyone will be able to see every tiny fucking detail pulled apart so we can get to the bottom of what is hyperbole, scandalous headlines, and what was just stupid little boys playing stupid games. But like they say, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Activision Blizzard's initial reaction to the lawsuit and allegations was farcical. Fran Townsend said this. Bobby Kotick said this. And because one part of Blizzard seemed to be denying the claims, whilst other parts of the company seemed to be apologising for them, the staff eventually said, "Fuck this." Thousands of developers signed a joint letter of protest and started having walkouts. No doubt mindful of the storms brewing, earlier in the year Blizzard had hired Frances Townsend to head up its Women's Network / Spy Network. Well, that was a odd hiring choice. A corporation is having issues with ongoing institutional sexual harassment and bullying, so they install a former prosecutor, NSA spook manager, defender of enhanced interrogation techniques and anti-whistleblower to take charge of women's issues and concerns. Enhanced interrogation, by the way, is posh speak for torture. It's a euphemism. It's like when the armed forces say they regret there was some unavoidable collateral damage, when really they mean they dropped a fucking J-dam on a play school. Now don't get me wrong, Frances Townsend seems like a special kind of lady. She's a former intelligence agency spook who likes spying, violating people's constitutional rights, putting people in prison, and torture. That's a fucking dating profile right there. I would. If you hire someone like Fran Townsend because you have sexual harassment issues, well, she's not there to help the victims. She is there to silence the victims, silence the friends of the victims, and protect the company from its own misdeeds. You hire a specialist in workplace abuse or a civil rights lawyer if you really want to help the victims of abuse at your company. You don't pop round to the NSA and ask them if they have anyone spare for the afternoon who likes spying and a bit of torture. When California announced the law case, Fran Townsend called bullshit on them, and called bullshit on the people making the accusations. Then Bobby Kotick went into damage limitation mode and called bullshit on Fran Townsend. Then they moved her into another job, and she posted some shit on Twitter about why whistleblowers are evil. Then shortly afterwards deleted her entire Twitter account. Probably because everyone noticed that she is evil incarnate. Then eventually things started to heat up even further when Activision Blizzard announced they were going to have a full internal audit to put an end to all of this injustice and seek fairness and peace throughout the land. So they hired the company WilmerHale to do it. A company that is best known as a union-busting specialist that works with the likes of Amazon. Allegedly, they basically use misinformation and propaganda campaigns to disintegrate collective bargaining and unionisation. I'm sure that WilmerHale are a highly effective bunch, but they clearly were not hired for the best interests of the workers and to root out the guilty parties and increase worker welfare. They were hired to shut down all complaints and dissent, identify the complainants, and shut them down too. I assume by threatening them with lawsuits, sacking and harassing them into signing NDAs, packing their desks and fucking off into anonymity. Hiring WilmerHale to investigate staff complaints against management is analogous to bringing in the Chicago mob during a docker strike. They ain't there to protect anyone's fifis, They are there to break bones and crack skulls so that people shut the fuck up and get back to work. The optics of hiring Wilma Hale were terrible. It was like hiring a slaughterman from the local abattoir to run a veterinary practice. There could only be one outcome, and that outcome is a lot of free sausage meat. And let's not forget that this all happened at a company that is famous for spontaneously and arbitrarily laying off entire departments on a whim. I reckon working at Activision Blizzard must be a fairly stressful experience, especially as a woman. You work in an environment where your job is constantly hanging by a thread, so you have to keep on the right side of your manager, and he is chasing you around the work bus with a butt plug clutched in his sweaty fist. You have spooks bullying you into silence, and if you complain, both you and your department might be laid off. Yeah, you heard that right. That has actually happened, allegedly, but I will come back to that in a moment. Then, on top of all of this, J. Allen smirking bastard Brack resigned. So it's not all bad news. At least we got to see one pro-People's Republic of China apologist's greasy head on a proverbial pike. Now, new additions were added to the law case that intimates other corporate shenanigans, including shredding evidence and God knows what else. This is the part where it gets into deep legal territory because some of the allegations are technically existing in very grey areas of the law. Just because the state of California claims evidence is being shredded doesn't mean all the shredding going on at Activision is shredding of actual evidence. I would advise you to check out Virtual Legality's analysis of the lawsuit, because while some of the scandalous headlines make for good clickbait titles, there seems to be a hell of a lot of latitude to the interpretation. And let's face it, the state of California couldn't even spell the word Cosby correctly in its initial filing. So yes, I'm not entirely trusting that California's legal filings are 100% factually accurate either, because given the severity and nature of the typos in the court filing, I would probably trust their lawyers to fill out a pizza order, but I certainly wouldn't trust them to fill out a medical prescription. This said, the full breadth and scope of the allegations could fill an encyclopedia. But if you forget everything else, remember this. Activision Blizzard have been shitting on their customers for long enough as it is. Now it turns out they're also shitting on their staff, even harder than we realised. At least one female staffer killed herself on a work trip. One of the managers involved was packing a butt plug and KY jelly when interviewed by the cops. They pass around naked pics of female staff members at parties. They have a special hotel room called the Cosby Suite. Activision Blizzard certainly seem to be well and truly in Jeffrey Epstein territory at this point. Certainly part of Blizzard's woes relate to what I call the two-tier corporation problem. I'm sure this has a proper grown-up name, but I didn't go to business school. I just watch videos on the internet. But it goes something like this. Imagine some hypothetical company that makes tampons. They are very good at making tampons. They have a great brand image and reputation. Everyone there is a very good tampon maker and specialised in their craft. Everyone is well paid and well cared for, and all the workers care passionately about their work, the product and the company. It's a business operated and run by expert tampon master craftsmen. Then along comes Evil Corp and says, "We want to buy that company." They move in, insert their own guys in upper management, and very quickly shift the operational focus away from quality towards maximising profit. Very quickly the company transforms into a two-tier system. At the bottom you have the workers, the tampon makers, and the entirety of management gets populated with managers and executives with no experience in the tampon industry, no knowledge of the actual work being done, and they're just experts at profit, marketing, sales, PR, and cutting costs. Some of them have probably never even seen a tampon. Figuratively speaking, of course. Suddenly they're outsourcing operations to China, cutting corners in the production process, sacking the expensive, expert, experienced staff. They're viewing the tampon makers like they're an inconvenience, an annoyance, an overhead that they would like to reduce. The people actually doing the fucking work become just another overhead on the spreadsheet. The people making the actual tampons become a liability, and the people running the company care nothing about the product. They only give a shit about shareholders, dividends and profits. For all they care, the tampons could be spontaneously combusting or fucking exploding. As long as they get that profit in by the end of the financial year, the actual product itself is now just a means to an end, not an end in itself. Suddenly a day comes when someone realises that the brand is now all about hype and publicity. The veteran tampon makers have all gone. And most importantly, the tampons are now terribly, terribly shit quality. The company is now making more money than ever before, but making the worst product it's ever made. The customer loses, the brand loses, the staff loses. Everyone is a fucking loser, apart from the shareholders and the CEO. My point is that Blizzard used to be one of the most amazing game companies on the planet, but sadly, they've been taken over by corpos, and many of the old guard are gone. And at some point along this timeline, Blizzard stopped being a company that aspired to make good games, and turned into a company that primarily only exists to make profit, and games just happen to be the market they're operating in. They, like many video game companies, are simply making the minimal viable product to put on the shelves, synchronised with a huge promotion and PR campaign to get us suckers to buy it, so they can abandon it and move on to the next cash cow a few weeks later. Focusing on making good video games and trying to do it profitably, compared to focusing on profit and using video games to do it, might seem to some like a subtle distinction, but it's a very real one. Kingdom Come Deliverance is a game made by a company trying to make a great game. The Division 2 is a game made by a company trying to make huge profits, who just happen to be using a video game to do it. The difference in both process and end result should be crystal fucking clear. The small and large signs of the coming betrayal. Well, there's the general monetisation and abandonment of World of Warcraft, sacking hordes of their community managers and then rehiring for the same positions later on lower pay. Wyatt Cheng's disastrous 2018 BlizzCon announcement and the infamous "Don't you have phones?" Diablo Immortal's mobile reveal.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
J. Allen Brack's smirking apology. He literally laughed at the audience / suckers.
So what exactly?
Introducing an entire panda-based expansion to World of Warcraft because they wanted to suck up to China. When the esports player Blitzchung made a protest about the suppression of Hong Kong democracy and China's failure to abide by its own treaties of governance, Blizzard banned him, confiscated his prize and sacked the 2 Taiwanese presenters. After absolute total outrage and US politicians questioning China's influence over US corporations, eventually they backed down a tiny bit. Blitzchung got his prize money. His ban was slightly reduced, but the Taiwanese presenters remained fired. I guess because Taiwan's about to get invaded by China, so they needed to leave some heads on the block. They cancelled the Heroes of the Storm esports program at zero notice, and I mean like telling all the people involved that it was all fine, and then a few days later sacking the whole plan and throwing their esports players and staff under the fucking bus. Some players had quit college, left jobs, moved town, practiced for months, only to hear from social media that their esports career was over before it had even begun. They even banned the /spit emote from World of Warcraft, or planned to at least, as part of some faux attempt to appear like they actually gave a shit about people's feelings and harassment. Yeah, they broke a bit of one of their classic games, pissing people off, just to make a PR statement. Pathetic. I heard a rumour that it was also related to people spitting on players who bought certain in-game microtransactions, but what do I know? What I do know is that messing with a 16-year-old emote as some kind of weak attempt at virtue signalling is cuckoldry of the highest order. I'm not trained in human resources, but if I was in charge of human resources at Blizzard, I would consider banning butt plugs and lube as being of higher priority than banning in-game emotes. We also have to remember that Bobby Kotick walked off with a $200 million bonus, then immediately culls his developer staff across the company, laying off an estimated 800 plus staff worldwide to save, no irony here, costs. Warcraft 3 Reforged, possibly one of the biggest pile of fuck reboots in video game history. In fact, it sets the bar for how not to remaster a legacy title. The whole marketing campaign was a lie. The game was generally seen to be worse than the original. It overwrote the original, so you had to buy a second physical copy of the original if you wanted to revert back to it. And it came with an end-user license agreement that claimed intellectual and commercial property rights over any maps that you create. This was like paying cash money for a slap in the fucking chops. Really think about this. Blizzard made a reboot of a video game originally released in 2002 and somehow made it worse than the 16-year-old original. Charged $30 for the privilege and deleted your original copy of the game. If that doesn't scream piss taker, I don't know what does. Then there are the less well-known shitty activities of ActiBlizz. Tactically sacking entire sections of the company to expunge particular employees who've made complaints to HR. Yes, you heard that right. Insider sources have alleged that some of these huge layoffs at ActiBlizz were not just about cost saving. Someone or some group of people within that cohort had made complaints to HR about their treatment. So Activision Blizzard, it has been claimed, exercised a scorched earth policy and laid off whole sections of the company so as to camouflage the fact that they were really just trying to expunge a few specific people. It's been alleged that basically, if you complain, you and your project team might be thrown out of the door. And all the while, Bobby Kotick is taking home multi-million-dollar bonuses and laughing all the way to the bank/private island. I think at this point it's safe to say that Activision Buttplug has turned into an amoral shitshow, and anyone who has read the headlines over the last month and felt genuinely surprised about this stunningly not shocking revelation either lives in an underground bunker or is self-delusional. How many red flags do you need to see? Activision Blizzard has been telegraphing their moral bankruptcy for years. Put simply, for a long time now, they have been a company that do shitty things, then put out a press statement saying, "We are nice people and we will try harder." The majority of the Blizzard acolyte community just shrugged and said, "Aw, shucks, what a bunch of nice guys. Why don't we let them off?" And all the while this shit has been going on, all the legendary developers and historical creative figures at the company have been quietly resigning and leaving this shit before it completely sinks. The fan community is a controversial issue these days, but very pertinent when it comes to issues like corporate behaviour. It's funny how video game publishers, TV and film studios and comic book publishers like to dunk on their own fans. Because let's not forget that the fans are actually the customers. And they are the ones paying the fucking bills. When gamers decry the bullshit woke politics and character destruction in The Last of Us 2, we are labelled as bigots. When gamers are in uproar about Diablo Immortal being a mobile app, we are called entitled. When gamers scoff at female Nazi soldiers in Battlefield 5, we are called sexist. When gamers laugh hysterically at black Nazi soldiers in Call of Duty World War II, we are called racists. And the same rules apply to the rest of the entertainment industry. The Ghostbusters remake, the Mary Sue Star Wars sequels, the shitty woke rebooted comic book stories, the regendered heroes, the desexualised female characters, the emasculated male protagonists. These companies crank out shit product, and when the fan communities hate it and complain, they call us names and attribute our opinions to character defects. Apparently, we don't like it because we're bad people. And let's not forget the most critically important word in that statement. We. Because the we in that statement is the customers. You see, the customers have become the enemy in this equation because we, the customers, are now an annoyance. Just like those annoying workers that do all the actual work. Customers are now the enemy because we stand in the way of profit. We are an obstruction to entertainment companies turning out low-grade, minimal-effort, woke, progressive, marketing-friendly shit-spew products and then making lots of money from it. We are essentially the only gatekeepers between their shit products and their undeserved profits. That is why people who complain are labelled toxic by community managers and paid shills. That is why the term toxic is deployed to neutralise criticism. There is a deliberate and concerted attempt to position unhappy customers as malcontents, outsiders, morally deficient, and disruptive elements. Yeah, the dudes who peddle gambling to kids think dissatisfied customers are the bad guys in this equation. How about them butt plugs? This is why so many entertainment companies hate their fan communities and try and silence and manipulate them. And this is also why we need to keep making our voices heard. We are the customers and nobody's going to complain for us. When fan communities go apeshit, well, good. When video game communities go apeshit over monetization, buggy unfinished games and censorship on the forums, subreddit and Discord, well, excellent. It's some of the only feedback mechanisms the customers have access to, and it's important that our voices are heard. And in the case of Activision Blizzard, J. Allen Brack has been getting up on that stage at BlizzCon and pissing in the faces of the fans for too many years. And because they have always been given a hall pass, the company has behaved worse and worse, eventually reaching the point where they didn't feel accountable to their customers, their staff, or anyone. Because so many gamers loved Blizzard from the old days, they kept getting away with it. Sure, there was some localised uproar, but they never earned their EA badge of fuckery that they truly deserved. The gaming community ignored the small signs of the coming betrayal. Well, now here it is, in its full lubricated glory. Patricio Rosario recently wrote an article for GPN where he discusses the role of ultras in gaming communities. Broadly speaking, ultras are the most vocal critics participating in gaming communities. A key point he makes is that these incredibly passionate, involved and energised characters in the community serve essentially as gatekeepers for the publishers, because they raise hell when corporations take the piss. We need more of this. When it comes to Activision Blizzard and the law case, I'm sure, like in most disputes, there are two sides to this story. But however you spin it, this is a story of sexual harassment, groping, bullying, butt plugs, suicide, unfair pay deals, tactical mass layoffs, merciless destruction of developers' careers, abusing staff, abusing customers, and Activision Blizzard hiring a torture specialist and union busters to investigate the claims. Whichever side you come down on, Activision Blizzard have already established themselves as being an army of amoral fucks. The stuff we know factually to be true is a litany of malevolent corporate fuckery, and now there is a giant wheelbarrow of new filth being wheeled through the door to sift through. Maybe all these accusations about the Cosby Suite, workplace suicides, sharing nudes of female staff, butt plugs and lube have all been taken out of context and will be readily explained away as innocent events. But it could equally be true that the situation is far worse and we have only just scratched the surface. I guess that is for the court to decide. There is, however, a rather smirk-worthy twist to all of this. It's immediately tempting to view this scenario as a simplistic story of good and bad guys. The state of California is rushing in like a white knight to challenge the presumed guilty Activision Blizzard of their heinous workplace crimes. Well, whilst I certainly think Blizzard is guilty of many heinous abuses of its workforce, here comes the smirk-worthy part. Certainly from what I've seen, the state of California appears to be pivoting its legal challenge to almost exclusively focus on gender pay disparity, ill treatment of female employees and sexual harassment of women in the workplace. So the most accurate way to portray this particular legal narrative is this. The state of California is suing Activision Blizzard for sexism, whilst pretty much only bothering with the issues that affect the female staff. It seems that the Californian state legislature doesn't give a shit about the men at Activision Blizzard, even though they've been thrown through the ringer as well. Perhaps Activision should sue California for being sexist too. We as customers need to hold these publishers accountable and raise hell every time they act like shits. Or by ignoring the small signs of the coming betrayal, we are foregoing our opportunity to manage our customer relationship with these publishers, which ultimately always leads to a more significant betrayal. Just like any relationship, the relationship between an entertainment company and their customer needs to be managed. We as customers need to manage our relationship with these corporations. When they do small, shitty things, we mustn't forgive them. We must address these behaviours loudly and vocally and complain and take issue. Because trust me, these corporations are not slouching when it comes to managing our relationship. They hire teams of PR guys. They bombard us with cinematic advertising campaigns that barely resemble the games. They police public communication platforms with community managers. Their agents and proxies infiltrate gaming communities. They pay off YouTubers to promote certain positions and promote certain narratives. They take over our subreddits, ban wave critics on Discord servers and astroturf your forums. These companies certainly seem to think that the relationship requires very careful management, and they spend billions of dollars a year across the video game industry doing precisely that. Managing our relationship on our behalf, and not to service our best interests. The more we fail to call them out for their shit, the worse they become. When a girl commits suicide on a staff trip, a trip where your managers were sharing naked pics of female staff members on the bus, on your way to a location that has a dedicated room set aside for trying to cop off with intoxicated female members of staff, where senior managers shamelessly try and cop a feel, and the manager being interviewed by the police is clutching a butt plug and lubricant in his pocket whilst he's being questioned, I don't think it's controversial to suggest that your workplace culture might not be meeting the standards expected of a civilised first world nation. I don't think that shit would fly in fucking Somalia, let alone California. It certainly appears, to me, that Activision Blizzard has turned into a company run by liars, torture specialists, rape enablers and China apologists. But this should come as no surprise to any of us. Just look at their sketchy behaviour over the last 5 years. They've been foreshadowing this particular big reveal for a very, very long time. Allegedly. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.